Welcome to the Ex Good Girl podcast, the place where people pleasers, perfectionists, and overgivers come to unlearn the good girl rules that you thought were making you good, but now you can see are actually just keeping you small. If you've spent your life being unable to say no, putting everyone else's needs and feelings above your own, constantly seeking external approval, or avoiding conflict to make others feel comfortable, if guilt and resentment feel like a constant weight in your life, it is time to learn to knock that shit off. Every episode, we dive into the stories, skills, and strategies that you need to stop shrinking, start speaking up, and to live a life that is authentically and unapologetically yours, while also deepening the connection and vulnerability in the relationships that matter to you. I'm glad you're here. Let's jump in. I don't usually record introductions for solo episodes, but after I was done with the episode you're about to hear, I was made aware of this just amazing poem from the poet Danielle Coffyn that just recently won the Pushcart Prize. I'm going to read it to you because it is such an important piece of context for the episode you're about to hear. If Adam picked the apple, by Danielle Coffyn, there would be a parade, a celebration, a holiday to commemorate the day he sought enlightenment. We would not speak of temptation by the devil. Rather, we would laud Adam's curiosity, his desire for adventure, and knowing we would feast on apple-inspired fare, torts, chutneys, pancakes, pies. There would be plays and songs, reenacting his courage. But it was Eve who grew bored, weary of her captivity in Eden, and a woman's desire for freedom is rarely a cause for celebration. Enjoy the episode. All right, y'all. Next week, you are going to hear a really fun interview that I did with Dr. Kelly Casperson. Find her on Instagram right now. She is funny. She is real. She is an expert. She's a urologist, so she knows all about how women's sexual organs respond to perimenopause, which is something every single one of us will go through. And as I was preparing for her interview, one of the topics I wanted to talk about with her, and you'll hear us address it next week, is how women can become the partners that a lot of our doctors need us to be in this moment, because perimenopause is still something, unfortunately, very, very new to my generation and to younger generations and even some older generations in terms of getting help for the symptoms because of a series of really unfortunate events, including a botched study that blamed estrogen for breast cancer. Less than 2% of women who could benefit from hormone replacement therapy are accessing hormones to help their symptoms. And I have taken on this role as a volunteer perimenopause missionary because it had such, and is having, continuing to have a profound effect in my own life. And such an impact on the lives of my sisters and my friends whom I love, who are females, who are dealing with this. And a lot of times it feels like it's me and my sisters and friends with some TikToks trying to figure this shit out. And that's why I wanted to interview Dr. Casperson. That's why I talk about it in my social media platforms and on my stories. I share my own story of how I began perimenopause at 38 and didn't even know that's what it was, and just watched myself decline for the next 12 years while I got more and more depressed about the state of what I just thought was like a body that was just failing, and it doesn't have to be that way. The purpose of today's episode, though, as I was researching how I wanted to have the conversation with Dr. Casperson, I'm a zoom out, then zoom in kind of girl. I like to have the context, or as much of the context as possible when discussing someone or when talking with someone or getting to know someone, because I feel like the context clarifies so much of the problem. So we're talking about perimenopause, and very few of myself and women my age even know what it is and what it does and why it's happening and what the symptoms are and what we can do about it. And I just found myself asking, why is that? How have we gotten to this particular time in place? And I had some ideas, but researching opened up something that I felt was significant enough that I wanted to have a whole separate episode about it. So let's jump in, because every religious tradition, every single major world religion taught at some time, and some even continue to teach, that women who are menstruating are unclean. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. Now, I know some of them don't continue to teach that, but every single one of them did. And that felt like a really important thread. And I, followed it back. It's not hard to figure out. It's Eve. It's Eve. And here's why. In Christian traditions, Eve is the woman who is responsible for humanity's fall from paradise. Now, side note, in Mormon land, there's a different narrative about her that makes her more of an agent who decides to take a difficult choice because she knows it's what's better for humanity. But we're talking about Christianity, the religion that has been one of the major world religions for millennia, with millions and millions and millions of adherents. And guys, this is what they're taught about Eve. They're taught that she was a weak-willed woman, that she gave into temptation, that she was morally and intellectually inferior to Adam, and that is why we're not all living in Eden, not having to work, just enjoying being in paradise. When you think about the ways that patriarchy has been used to justify control of women and their bodies and choices, it all goes back to Eve, at least if you follow Christianity. Because when Eve eats the apple, it is because she is too dumb not to. And then her depiction becomes that of a seducer and a temptress. And then she goes to Adam and she gets him to eat the apple because her body is just too sexual and too irresistible for poor Adam. And so not only is she responsible for the terrible decision to eat the apple, but she's also responsible for poor Adam's choice as well. And I cannot think of anything more astounding. But yet, here we are, that choice reinforced women as disqualified from authority positions in the church, leadership positions, the priesthood. The Eve narrative has been used to argue that women are inherently unfit for authority, unfit to teach, unfit to have leadership. And it just so happens that all the men are the ones who are fit. Eve's role has been compounded with, bad judgment to include women as sexually dangerous. In my own experience in Mormon land, I'm a 12 and 13-year-old girl attending the classes for young women, and I was taught that my body could be responsible for men's or boys' impure thoughts. that I, by not covering up, by not being modest, could inadvertently lead a boy to have a sinful thought. Now, it just doesn't take a genius to connect that to the current rape culture that we all see when we blame women, we blame victims for what they were wearing, for being raped, but it has far more reaching and reverberating implications because this has shaped the attitudes towards women's bodies that have led to policies that police women's attire, women's behavior, women's sexuality, and holding us accountable for the moral failings of men and boys. You will notice there's some heat in my voice over this, not only because I lived it when I was 12 and 13, but because my daughter continued to live it just a decade ago, right? Not even that long ago, there are Christian denominations that are continuing to blame girls for the behavior of boys and men. And they're requiring girls to cover up in churches, in schools. I mean, how many of you can think of a school uniform policy that you know? I can think of one in several of our local schools that polices what girls wear because they think it will make it easier or better for the boys. So this purity culture focuses on women having to be the ones who cover up, the ones who maintain purity. And if a man or a boy has an impure thought, it's their fault. It frames women's worth around their sexual behavior. And we see it everywhere. Women are blamed for sexual violence perpetrated against themselves. And it all goes back to Eve and our ideas, at least in part, about how she is blamed for that decision, which is a myth. It's not even true. Taking a deep breath. So let's continue. The story of Eve as the bearer of the punishment for her choices has also influenced negative attitudes towards women's reproductive rights. If women cannot be trusted to make choices, women certainly cannot be trusted with their own bodies. This is the justification for policies that restrict women's access to reproductive health care, including abortion, which is health care. As childbirth, pain, and suffering is interpreted as a punishment for Eve, like that's how some sects of Christianity teach that Eve was punished. She would now labor and have pain in childbirth. It only makes sense that if God is punishing Eve for her choices, she can't be trusted. And so the men need to step in. And today we have men who believe that it is their not only prerogative, but their right to make laws about women's bodies. In some Christian teachings, this has translated even to opposition to contraception, asserting that women should bear the consequences of sex, which is bonkers because there is no mention of men. And so when you look at the landscape today of women being ashamed and not knowing about their own bodies, about the current political climate that demonizes women for wanting control over their own bodies, here you go. Eve is involved. Taking a breath. The next idea that I ran into over and over as I was researching the big picture context is that there is something about Eve being deceived by a serpent that is used to cast doubt on women's judgment and decision-making abilities. Women are considered not as smart, even today. And there is a lasting impact on women's credibility. And this shows up in the doctor's office. One of my very first conversations with my male doctor was a list of symptoms and things that I thought were going wrong. And I wanted to talk with him about perimenopause. And he looked at me and he said, well, I'm not sure you know exactly what you're talking about. And, quote, we don't practice that kind of medicine here. And so today, in my doctor's office, when he is telling me that I don't know what's going on with my own body, this is why. Because for centuries and centuries, this doubt that has been infused when we're listening to women, right? That's why we have to beg people today to just believe women. Why would we have to beg to be believed if it weren't the inherent cultural narrative that, oh, I just don't know about women and their ability to know what's going on with their own bodies, let alone their credibility in their professional lives, right? How many times do women feel like they have to know twice as much as the men they work with? They have to be twice as good as the men they work with. You see it today in the current political climate. I don't care who you are voting for. Kamala Harris is held to a different standard of knowing what she knows and being able to represent that than Donald Trump. It is just different. And it stems from this idea that women, we just, oh, do they really have good judgment? Are they able to make good decisions? Do they really know what they know? Because of this story. This also contributes to this idea of, which is rampant in my particular religious background, Mormonism, called benevolent sexism. Benevolent sexism isn't going to come out and tell you to your face that you're stupid and we don't believe you and you need us to make the decisions for you. What benevolent sexism is going to do is it's going to say, you know what? Let us protect you. Don't worry about it. You are good women. We love you. But we need to step in and make some decisions to help you, to protect you. It is a reaction to perceived vulnerability and incompetence. Now, in Mormon land, what they'll tell you is that it's just because women are so special, right? Women are just we love women so much that we don't want them to be burdened by decision-making and authority and leadership. The mantle of leadership is heavy. It is complicated. And women, we love you so much that we're just going to do that for you. And it is so fucking patronizing. And if it were only patronizing, that would be one thing. But it actually leads to consequences for women. In religious organizations, they can't lead. In community and in cultural contexts, they have to be protected. They have to be shielded from making the decisions about their own bodies, about having access to information and knowledge about their own bodies. It is wild. Taking a deep breath. Another area that I saw is that self-perception, right? The perception that we as women have today has been shaped by the women before us. The women before us had a lot of guilt and shame and inherent badness, quote unquote, that affected their self-esteem, their personal growth, their mental health. And because we are kind of infused with that guilt and shame, and I felt it. I felt the guilt and shame of not only being a girl, but that I was bad. Y'all, I thought about sex so much when I was young. And the church that I went to taught how sexual sin was second only to murder. And so you can imagine what that did in the mind of a 12 and 13-year-old girl. It essentially taught me that because I thought about and was so curious about sex so much, I felt like there was something like truly horrific about me. I felt like there was something really, really wrong with me as a person. And I tried to make up for that by being so, so good. So good. So many women internalize the narrative of you're not smart enough, you need to be protected, your body is inherently sexual and it could lead other people to sin. You are descended from the first woman who made the most wrong decision that's ever been made. You need to be helped and you can't be trusted to make your own decisions. That's got to sound real familiar for a lot of you listening. And so when we today end up in doctors' offices, it is no wonder that we are still trying to be selfless and put others first, right? This can make it really difficult for women to ask for the medical attention that they need to seek help or to insist on getting care. I talk to so many women who have ongoing health issues that they have never addressed because they don't prioritize themselves. They don't give themselves the same time that they give other people in their lives. If their kid is sick or someone else that they are responsible for, or if their partner is sick, they will make the time to get their problems addressed. But when it comes to their own perimenopause symptoms or their own sicknesses or their own pain, bodily pain, they don't address it. No wonder that so many of us are sitting in doctors' offices trying to not be demanding. This idea that women should be easygoing and not make a fuss can make it really, really difficult when you're in a doctor-patient dynamic, when you want more information, right? You are dismissed by some doctors. And this don't be demanding, don't be difficult, don't rock the boat. Oh, it shows up so big. And I want you to be aware of it because one of the things that you are going to have to do to get adequate perimenopause care is insist on a doctor who believes you, on a doctor who will listen to you. No wonder we are in doctors' offices trying to be polite, trying to be agreeable, trying to avoid confrontation. This makes it really difficult to push back against inadequate healthcare, or when you want to insist on some additional tests or a second opinion. Those are crucial during menopause when symptoms can be misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed or completely overlooked. No wonder it is difficult to insist. Our programming is to be polite. On the flip side, there is a different, really insidious programming that often comes into play for women during perimenopause. And it's the one that keeps them out of the doctor's office completely. Yes, but being selfless and putting others first will keep you out of the doctor's office. But the cultural narrative of women having to tough it out, right? If Eve is being punished by pains, monthly menstrual pains, and by pains in childbirth, that is her curse to bear for her sin. That endures today in women who are taught that you got to be tough, you got to be strong, you have to endure. And it can really discourage women from seeking medical care and support. So many of you are enduring symptoms that you don't have to. Remember, there are over 100 perimenopause symptoms that get better when you start taking hormone replacement therapy. That's always a decision you need to make with your doctor. But this idea of women being tough and being strong and toughing it out, friends, we don't have to. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be relieved of symptoms that are uncomfortable. You see it in the way that women just endure their period cramps and period symptoms every single month. Taking a deep breath. Don't make people uncomfortable. That's another big part of our good girl programming that shows up in the doctor's office. Since menopause symptoms are about our sex organs, they're often seen as taboo. And women are encouraged by broader cultural, ideas that your period is gross, that you have to wrap up that pad so that nobody can see it. Nobody knows what's happening to you. Women tend to downplay or hide their symptoms, afraid of making other people uncomfortable by talking about things like hot flashes or sexual changes. No wonder it is difficult to get the care that we need around those things. Next, the good girl programming that you got to be nice, not angry. Anger is one of the most stigmatized emotions in women, leading them to pretend it's not happening. This can make you reluctant to advocate strongly for better healthcare or strongly for support from partners or colleagues to set boundaries. They're the feminine rage that is bubbling below the surface of so many women. Guess what? That rage has a message for you. And often that message is, we're fucking tired of not being taken care of. Anger is one of the most powerful mobilizing emotions. And one of the things that immobilizes in you is to take better care of yourself. And so if you are feeling angry, that emotion is there for a reason, and you need to listen to it. I'm not saying that means unload on a medical professional who is trying to help you, but understanding that advocating for yourself in strong language is sometimes necessary. You can say, I have to insist on some extra blood tests around this, or I'm going to insist that I get a second opinion on this. I am not going to ignore my personal feeling that I want some more information about this. We got to do it, women. We have to do it. We are not yet at a place where there is enough, where the Eve story has been totally stripped from the culture and the narrative. And we have to find, gosh, this is the thing that is just so hard, is that, let me take a second here and just name something that I know was super tender for me. When the symptoms were the highest, one of the things that was the hardest was that my resilience had evaporated. Here, I needed to be making all these doctor's appointments and arguing for my care. And I get it. My heart just breaks remembering how difficult it was for me to do anything other than just get through work. And so if that is you, I hear you. And what I want you to know is that it gets better. And one of the things we have to do for it to get better is we have to advocate for ourselves, sometimes in a way that feels fueled by anger. And it's okay. This kind of runs into the next good girl programming that I wanted to point out, and that's not being a burden. This notion or idea of not wanting to, quote unquote, bother others, sometimes even our doctors, with our personal struggles, can get in the way of women seeking support, asking for what they need, setting boundaries around what they don't want to be doing anymore, and openly discussing the impacts of perimenopause in their lives. Not being a burden shows up in the way that you continue to do everything for your family that you've already done, everything for your colleagues and at work that you've already done, everything for your parents, for your friends. Not being a burden comes from the fact that Eve was such a burden. And it's time to let that go. We deserve to have the support that we need, not just to get through perimenopause, but to weather it well, to have the support, not just for our bodies and hormones, but for our homes and for our workplaces as well. There's another really insidious good girl programming item that shows up here. And it's that women should always be attractive and that aging is bad, right? Our bodies are meant to be something for someone else to enjoy, for something that someone else takes pleasure in. This makes the physical changes of perimenopause harder to accept, harder to talk about. And that really contributes to a lot of shame and silence, rather than walking into the doctor's office and saying, this is where I am and this is what I need. It leads to a lot of money and effort and energy being spent on remaining young and youthful. And listen, I have skin creams. I want to take care of my skin. I don't have an opinion about women who want to spend time and energy and effort continuing to be attractive and youthful. Totally fine. Just know why you're doing it. And then spend some of that same time advocating for better health, advocating for more support. Because in our pursuit of being attractive and youthful, sometimes we give up the support that we need, and it comes at a high cost during perimenopause. A couple others that I want. One of them I already really kind of addressed, don't rock the boat. Women have been punished by their doctors in some settings for rocking the boat, right? Women experience punishment in family dynamics for rocking the boat, for demanding more in workplace. And punishment can just mean being told that they're a burden, being told that they don't deserve the kind of help and support that they need. But yeah, when women are asking for changes that are urgently needed, a lot of times that's seen as rocking the boat. The last one that I really want to name is be grateful for what you get. This rule alone, this good girl rule, probably discourages more women than anything else from demanding more, be it more research, more funding for women's health, more time and attention from their healthcare providers, more tests, more time. Be grateful for what you get is one of these really insidious ones, because is gratitude good? Yes. Gratitude can be very good and helpful, and it can also be used to shut women up. So as you are thinking about where your health is, this is the zoom out that I wanted to give you, because it contributed to a whole cascade of medical biases and attitudes that we continue to suffer from today. Listen to this episode that I have next week with Dr. Casperson, because she gives us some really concrete things that we can do to become better educated, more knowledgeable about our bodies and how we can become the partners that a lot of our doctors need us to be, while the medical research and the resources are still catching up. But I don't ever want you to lose sight of how we got to this point, because once you see it, it's everywhere. Once you know that men could admit their wives to asylum against their will for quote unquote hysteria, and our female reproductive organ is called a uterus, and when it's removed, it is called a hysterectomy. Hysteria, hysterectomy. Hysterical means of the womb or of the female. You just can't not see it anymore. This idea that women are delicate and weak-minded, that we can't make decisions for ourselves, that we're not capable of deciding what we want for our own bodies. Do you know that it wasn't until 1993 where there was a law that mandated the inclusion of women's bodies? We don't have time for all that in today's episode. And every time I dive into, the history of how we got here, whether it's the religious and cultural history or the medical history, I get hot. I get really, really hot, because what I want for you and what I want for your daughters is choice. I want you to have the confidence to ask the questions, the choice about how to seek for help and support that you need. And sometimes the first thing that we need to have in order to make better decisions is a really accurate understanding of how we got here. I hope this episode has done that for you. I will talk to you next week. Hey, thanks for listening. If this podcast has been helpful to you, I would really appreciate it if you would give me a 5-star rating in whatever platform you listen to your podcasts. And if you go to my website, sarafisk.coach, you can sign up there to receive my emails. Right now, I'm taking private one-to-one clients who want my help speeding up this work in their own lives. I really hope to provide a lot of free information on my website and in my podcast for people to do this work on their own. But if you're interested in having a coach like me to help you implement these things faster, to find the blind spots and obstacles that you're not aware of, go to my website and sign up for a consult. That's a time when you and I can get on Zoom and talk about the particulars of your situation, and I can show you how I could be helpful. The second thing you can do on my website is sign up for a freebie that I have called Difficult Conversations. Having a conversation that seems like it's going to be hard or difficult is one of the things that people pleasers struggle with. And so I've created a whole guide for you to be able to do that with some more confidence. That will also get you signed up for information about my group program, Stop People Pleasing. It's a group coaching program where you join a community of women just like you who are struggling to overcome perfectionating and people pleasing, and we do it together in a group. It's a really amazing opportunity to not just learn from your own experience, but just to see how similar you are to so many other women out there. The healing and the challenging and the laughing and the growth that happens in that beautiful community of women is really amazing. And if it's interesting to you, I would love for you to know about it.